Maria Denisa Porn was just 30 years old, a Romanian woman living in Rome, Italy. She was a loving daughter, remembered by those who knew her as warm, kind and friendly. But her work as a high-end escort sometimes made her vulnerable to dangerous men. On May 13, 2025, Maria made a chilling call to a friend. Her voice trembling, she warned that if a certain man saw her, he will kill me, she said. She never revealed his name, and just 2 days later, she vanished without a trace. Her family and friends feared the worst, but that fear would soon turn to horror when investigators uncovered the remains of Maria. They were brutalized and desecrated, but most alarmingly, she was not the only one. What would come to light was the trail of a suspected serial killer, a man quietly building his own graveyard. Yet, the deeper authorities dug, only more answers were raised. How many victims were there, and how many graves remain hidden? This case is still ongoing. Although we know some of the victims, there are suspected to be many more. But I can only tell you about what we know so far, and it's brutal. But before we dive in, if you find this video fascinating, then please drop it a like and leave me a comment below. And if you are new here, then please hit the subscribe button and consider following me on Instagram. It all really helps. Thank you. This video is created solely for educational and documentary purposes. It does not endorse or condone the criminal actions described within. Maria Denisa Porn was born in Romania in 1999. Little is known about her early years, except that she married young. The marriage didn't last, and with no children to tie her down, she set her sights on a fresh start. At just 16, she moved to Rome, Italy, working temporarily in her mother's apartment building. Her mother was also called Maria, but eventually she stepped into a different world, one where she was known as Alexandra, as a high-end escort. She advertised her services on a popular website, carefully managing 2 separate lives. On one set of social media accounts, she was known as Maria, the smiling daughter who sent money home to help their family and spoke to her mother every day. On another, she was Alexandra, posting alluring photos meant to entice wealthy clients. Only her closest friends knew both sides of her life. Maria settled well into Rome's way of life. She had friends, a social life and dreams. But her escort work sometimes took her to other cities where she would rent apartments to meet clients. On May 13th, 2025, she traveled to Prato, not far from Rome, and rented an apartment. It was on this evening that Maria made a chilling phone call to her friend, suggesting violent threats had been made against her and that someone might even try to take her life. Then, after a few days, alarm bells began to ring. Maria had not contacted her mother for days, even though they normally spoke daily. She was worried. But it was when Maria's friend phoned her mother, revealing that Maria had missed social plans and that her phone was switched off. She also told her about the chilling call Maria had made just days earlier. Maria's mother rushed to Rome, and by May 17th, 2025, Maria was officially reported missing, and the Carabinieri, Italy's military police, launched an investigation. They quickly discovered she had rented an apartment in Prato. Once they arrived, they found the door unlocked, with the key still inside. The scene was chaotic. Furniture overturned, clothes and makeup scattered across the floor, and most alarmingly, outside, Maria's car was still there, with a parking ticket on the windshield. To investigators, one thing was clear. If Maria had left willingly, she would have taken her car and her belongings. Now they feared something darker, perhaps a kidnapping, maybe by a gang. During the search for Maria, a lawyer who had once worked with her family and was trusted by them contacted Maria's mother with shocking news. Maria was alive, he claimed, but had been kidnapped by a Romanian gang. He even described a stab wound she had supposedly suffered, insisting she needed urgent medical care. If they hired him, he promised he could negotiate her safe return. Clinging to the hope he offered, Maria's mother kept this information from the police, telling them only that she believed that Romanian gangs were responsible. She thought she was protecting her daughter, and that this was a good chance to get her home safely. But this hope was built on lies. Investigators soon discovered she had withheld crucial details about her conversations with the lawyer, a revelation that, unfairly, led them to consider her a suspect in her own daughter's disappearance. When the authorities finally confronted the lawyer, they searched his computer and phone. There was no evidence he had ever spoken to Maria or any gang members. He had simply exploited a grieving mother, hoping to profit from her desperation. While he knew other escorts in Rome, there was no proof he was linked to any criminal group. He was just an opportunist, inserting himself into a nightmare. Meanwhile, the real investigation was making progress. Police searched the area around Maria's Prato apartment, and they reviewed the building's CCTV footage. What they found gave them a lot to go on. At 10:30 p.m. on May 15th, a man carrying a black bag entered the apartment. 4 hours later, at 2:30 a.m., he left, this time dragging 2 large black and white suitcases. They belonged to Maria, who was never seen leaving the building. The suspect was visible on the camera, and he appeared to be a European man, about 5'7", medium build, with short black hair. He wore a face mask, which obscured his full identity, but another camera at the exit of the apartment complex captured the car he drove, a grey VW Golf. The plates were clearly visible and led police to 32-year-old Vasil Frumazake. Tracking him became easier when they discovered his car had a GPS tracker installed for insurance purposes. The data placed him leaving Maria's apartment in the early hours of May 16th, driving an hour to his home in Montecatini Terme, a town near Tuscany. Speed cameras also logged his license plate, making the same journey. But the most damning evidence came a few days later, when they managed to get Maria's mobile phone data. Her phone was turned on briefly, pinging on the motorway, exactly where Vasil's car was at that very moment. This was enough evidence to prove that Vasil spent a few hours at her apartment, and then they were both together, heading towards his home in the early hours of May 16th. But police were not ready to make an arrest. They wanted to find out what happened and build a solid case. But Vasil was very much the main suspect at this point. He was placed under surveillance while officers dug deeper into his actions on the night. GPS showed that after arriving home, Vasil stayed for a few hours, then visited a school before heading to an abandoned area near a dilapidated farmhouse. Officers suspected that this remote location could hold the key to finding Maria. On June 4th, they searched the overgrown site. Hidden deep in the brambles, they found it, a large white suitcase. Inside were the decapitated remains of a woman. They believed it was Maria, but DNA was needed for confirmation, as the head was nowhere to be found. Nearby, they found tire tracks, which they could forensically match to Vasil's car. Dirt from the site was also found on Vasil's car tires, and fibers from the clothing would later match those found on Maria and the suitcase. The next day, on June 5th, DNA confirmed the worst. The body was Maria's, and within hours, the police moved in, arresting Vasil and searching his home. When police finally arrested him, Vasil never suspected a thing. He was blindsided and they took him in for questioning. But who was Vasil Frumazake? Vasil was a 32-year-old Romanian man born in the small village of Nehoiu in eastern Romania. He moved to Italy at 14 with his parents, while his brother remained behind. The family settled in Sicily, and years later, Vasil married a woman called Luisa, a fellow Romanian. By 2022, they had moved to Monsemano Terme in Tuscany, raising 2 young boys who are now aged 4 and 5. To neighbours and friends, the family appeared perfectly normal and loving. Vasil and Luisa were inseparable, dropping their children off at school, shopping together, posting cheerful family holiday photos online. Their Facebook timeline painted a portrait of a normal, happy life. Christmas presents, summer outings, family dinners. To locals, they were the image of stability. Vasil himself had no criminal record whatsoever, which makes his involvement in this murder all the more shocking. To imagine him capable of such brutality seemed unthinkable. But inside the walls of his home, investigators found a darker side to him. A search uncovered women's underwear that did not belong to his wife, several mobile phones, one identified as Maria's, which were hidden away. The most disturbing discovery was a human vertebra that was found buried in his garden, alongside ash, which was suspected to be cremated remains. Tests on these were immediately ordered. But there was more. In his garage sat a black BMW. At first, it seemed unremarkable, but checks revealed it had recently been repainted and fitted with new license plates. Its previous owner was a woman named Anna Maria Andrea, an escort who had vanished in 2024. Police were stunned. Was this a chilling coincidence? Or had they just unmasked a potential serial killer who had been hiding in plain sight for years? At first, Vasil denied everything. During questioning, he insisted he had no involvement in Maria's disappearance. But as investigators laid out the mounting evidence against him, the pressure broke him. Late on June 5th, he finally confessed. "She tried to blackmail me, so I had to kill her," he told police. Vasil then told the authorities his version of events. On the night of May 15th, he admitted he went to Maria's apartment where they had intercourse, but afterwards she found out he worked as a security guard and had a family, and so she tried to blackmail him. She said she wanted 10 grand, or she would tell his wife about their intimacy. Vasil claimed he panicked and a fight erupted. In his account, Maria scratched and struggled desperately, trying to fight him off, but he pinned her to the bed, holding her down as she resisted with every ounce of strength she had left. After minutes of chaos, her fight faded. She stopped breathing. Vasil had strangled her to death. He told police he froze at first, not knowing what to do, but soon he came around, and what followed was methodical. He gathered her phones and belongings, placing them in a bag to erase all traces of contact. Spotting 2 large suitcases in the apartment, one black, one white, he decided they would be his means of disposal. He wrapped Maria's body in bed sheets and tried to force her into the white suitcase, but her body wouldn't fit, and so he found a sharp knife in the bathroom and he used it to decapitate her, and thus making her body fit into the white suitcase. He said he put her head in the black suitcase and left the apartment building with her remains. Outside, his Volkswagen Golf waited. He loaded the suitcases into the trunk and drove off to his home. Police believed parts of his account, mainly that he had murdered Maria, but other details raised suspicion. Despite his story of decapitation, investigators had found no significant blood in the apartment. How could he have dismembered a body in such a confined space without leaving any physical evidence? And his claims of blackmail didn't ring true, particularly since this was not the first time he had committed such a horrific act. When questioned about the black BMW found in his possession, once owned by the missing woman Anna Maria Andrea, Vasile quickly confessed again. At this point, he just felt the game was up. He admitted he had killed Anna too. He claimed he had hired her services, but that she refused when she realized he was Romanian. It's important to note that Anna herself was also Romanian, and many escorts reportedly avoid clients from their own country, fearing word might get back to their families about what line of work they are in, and Vasile had pretended to be Italian when he booked her. When Anna refused, he said he snapped. He felt he was owed. He chased her with a knife and ended up stabbing her repeatedly until she lay dead. He admitted her remains were hidden not far away from where Maria's body was dumped. Even more disturbing, he revealed that Anna's remains were close to Maria's missing head, which investigators had yet to recover. To Vasile, the abandoned area was the perfect hiding place, a place no one would search, where the remains of his crimes would rot and eventually vanish into the earth. As investigators pieced events together, a clearer and more disturbing picture of Maria's final hours emerged. It became increasingly clear to the authorities that Vasile was not just a killer, but possibly a serial killer. They now believed Vasile was the very man Maria had phoned her friend about just days earlier, the one she feared may kill her. On the night of the murder, he allegedly used a private number to call Maria, booking her services off the website, a calculated move to avoid leaving a digital trail. After the killing, Vasile stuffed Maria's body into the white suitcase and drove home, arriving back at around 3:30 a.m. In the hours that followed, it is believed he dragged the suitcase into his garden, where investigators later found traces of blood. There, he decapitated her. He placed her head into a black plastic bag and locked it inside the other black suitcase, then loaded them both into his car. But why decapitate her at all? He had already strangled her, already silenced her. Was this gruesome act necessary, or was it part of a growing sadistic fantasy? Once Maria's remains were in the trunk, Vasile continued his mourning as though nothing had happened. He drove his children to school in the same car that now carried her body. They were oblivious to the horror hidden right next to them. From there, he headed to the abandoned farmhouse, where he dumped Maria's remains deep in the brush, believing she would never be found. Afterwards, surveillance cameras captured him casually shopping, strolling through stores, as though his morning had been routine. Later, he returned home, got dressed into his security uniform, and went to work as if nothing had happened. His chilling calmness after the murder convinced investigators that Vasile was experienced in the act of killing. Once Vasile admitted to the murders, he led authorities to an abandoned farmhouse. There, they discovered Anna Maria Andrea's remains and the missing head of Maria. Disturbingly, Vasile had attempted to burn Maria's head with petrol and wood. Nearby, investigators found 4 charred knives. But why 4? If one had been used to decapitate Maria, what horrors had the others been used for? This case is still far from closed, the full truth still unraveling. Behind bars, other inmates claim Vasile has boasted of many more victims yet to be discovered. Whether this is true or the twisted bragging of a killer seeking notoriety remains uncertain, but authorities suspect it could be true. While awaiting trial, Vasile himself became the target of violence. In the Prato prison, a 33-year-old inmate, who was an ex-partner of Anna Maria Andrea, poured boiling oil over his face, leaving him with first and second-degree burns. This was prison justice, the kind reserved for men who kill women. Now, the man who once passed as an ordinary family man, a husband, a father, a security guard, faces a very different life. With no prior criminal record, he will likely spend the rest of his years behind bars, marked by both his crimes and the vengeance of those around him. The chilling questions remain. Police have not revealed who the human vertebra buried in his garden belonged to, nor the origins of the women's clothing and the mobile phones found in his possession. His whereabouts over the past 7 years are being cross-checked against missing persons reports across Italy. Could there be more victims? For now, the full scale of Vasile's crimes remain uncertain, and authorities fear the horrors uncovered so far may only be the beginning. Thank you for watching. Until next time, stay sane.